So there was a lot of reporting, particularly last summer, about concerns that children were no longer in front of the mandated reporters, their teachers, their coaches, and the people who typically made referrals for abuse and neglect. We saw a very steady number of cases that came through. It didn't drop significantly at all, even though that was what a lot of areas were reporting. But what we did see is an increase in the severity of the abuse and neglect. So we saw a lot more, and we continue to see a lot more domestic violence cases, substance abuse, untreated mental health issues, and sexual abuse of children. And we're all sort of ramping up for what we believe is probably going to be a big increase of referrals as children go into school, and they have those trusted people that they can talk to, and teachers can observe much more of the child's presentation, maybe perhaps some visible bruises, issues with hygiene, which are changes in behaviors, which can all be indicators of abuse and neglect. One of the greatest misconceptions about child abuse and neglect is that it is limited to other towns, other neighborhoods, not in my backyard. And the reality is that abuse and neglect happens in every zip code. It happens in every race, every ethnic background, every socioeconomic level. It's everywhere. And to think that it doesn't happen in the home next door is doing a great injustice to the children who are abused and neglected. One of the things that I think is so unique to Spring2ACTion is that this is the Alexandria community coming together and recognizing how important it is to support our local organizations, specifically an organization like ours that is dedicated to ridding our community of abuse and neglect, and ensuring that our children can be safe and grow up in a safe neighborhood and in a safe home. And for me personally, the idea that people value the work that we do, and we definitely saw that with Spring2ACTion last year, is when the community came out and showed us really that they appreciate the hard work that our staff does, our volunteers do, and all the people who are part of this mission to ensure that our kids can be safe in their neighborhoods, in their homes, where they've grown up, and that they can all continue to live here in Alexandria and just be safe.
We'd like you to know that we will be responding to the needs of youth-serving organizations who have been rocked by the pandemic response. We know that they need new tools and approaches to address the increases in abuse that are well documented, and this includes sexual abuse. During the pandemic, children have faced neglect in the home, online sexual abuse, and mental health impacts like anxiety, self-harm, and suicide ideation as a result of those traumas. Because children who have experienced one form of abuse are more likely to have experienced multiple forms of abuse, and because they are more vulnerable to re-victimization, we know that we have a group of children, I would say a generation of children, going back into schools who are more vulnerable than ever before. In fact, the only way our schools and youth-serving organizations will be able to address this risk and trauma associated with more vulnerable students is to implement trauma-informed practices and learn more about abuse prevention and response. SCAN must address this need for increased capacity by sharing this work across all organizations, whether they be direct or indirect child serving, because a basic tenet of child protection is that all adults are responsible for keeping children safe. So, as part of our community, as our donors, as our partners in this work, you have a role to play.
COVID changed the way everybody operates, um, but it changed the way we think, and I don't think in a bad way. Um, we had to think and react differently, and sometimes better ways for families. I'll give you an example. So the way that we serve families through our educational programs has shifted. In the past, we've been traditionally been really focused on group work, workshops, classes. We now know, and I don't think it would surprise anyone to know that we've had to make our content more approachable online, right? So we've had to move to classes online. I think that needs to continue. But I also think a more individualized approach to how we serve families is necessary. Um, Having group classes will continue and it should continue. The community that's built in those classes is important for families, but also making sure that our programs meet the families where they are um, is equally important. Um, if COVID, kind of taught families anything, it's that they need to prioritize their family. And so if that means that we need to deliver content through multiple vehicles, we will. I spring to action because if last year taught us anything, it's that we need one another, that we are better when we have community.